You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hey folks, it's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The Iron Lady sings that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you, but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as the rest of the world, because we know you're here trying to make yourself better. For 16 years, 24 episodes, you've been following the Chris Voss Show, listening to all the wonderful guidance, stories, lessons of life, and just sheer education on how to be better and make a difference in the world. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights and his experience and how you can use it to make your life better. As always, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. He is the author of the latest book to come out May 20th, 2025, called The New Science of Momentum: How the Best Coaches and Leaders Build a Fire from a Single Spark. General Bernie Banks is with us on the show. He's the co-author of this book, along with Don Yeager, who didn't join us yet, but there's still time. Anyway, we'll get into it with Bernie and all of his insights here and all that good stuff. Bernie Banks is the director of Rice University's Doerr Institute for New Leaders and a professor in the practice of leadership within the university's Jesse H. Jones Graduate School of Business. He retired from the United States Army in 2016 as a brigadier general after having successfully led West Point's Department of Behavioral Sciences and Leadership in his final assignment. He has led multiple military units ranging in size from 10 to 3,000 plus people, and he's engaged with organizations around the globe regarding their leadership efforts and development. And welcome to the show. How are you, Bernie?
Doing well, Chris. It's wonderful to be here. How are you today?
I am excellent. You want me to refer to you as General throughout the show, or Bernie?
No, by no means, please. Bernie is great.
There you go. Well, we appreciate your service to this country. So, Bernie, give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Wow, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I think the easiest one is LinkedIn, just Bernard Bennett Banks.
There you
find
go.
me there. You can also find me on Rice University on the faculty website underneath the Doerr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University. I think those are the two easiest places.
There you go. We had someone from West Point who teaches leadership over there on the show. He'd written a book, and I think he does the thing. I'll have to find who it was and see if maybe you know who they were. But give us a 30,000 overview of what's in your new book.
Yeah. So if you go back to 2017, when the New England Patriots were playing the Atlanta Falcons in the Super Bowl, the Falcons were up 28-3 in the third quarter. And the prognosticator said there was over a 99% likelihood the Falcons were going to win that game.
Yeah.
Now, long story short, Patriots pull off a comeback. They win the game. Everybody says, how did that occur? And my co-author, Don Yeager, who's a very noted sports author, 12 times New York Times bestselling author, he had a question in that moment. He says, how does a moment turn into momentum?
Yeah.
How were they able to create small wins that stacked up to a big win? And that started an 8-year journey to explore what does it take to generate momentum in a sustainable way. And so our book examines what do we know about that talent. So we take a look at leaders across 4 verticals: business, sports, politics, and the military. And born out of their insights they shared with us from over 250 interviews, over 2,000 surveys, we have created a model that helps leaders to understand how they can go about generating momentum in a sustainable way.
There you
and
go.
That's what it discusses.
That was a hell of a comeback. In fact,
it was crazy. It was crazy, right? Like
it was
no
crazy to watch.
no one would have thought. I mean, people weren't even paying attention at Super Bowl parties.
People giving up and probably leaving the game, I think, and it's one of those things where they're like, no team has ever done this. And in the Super Bowl, when they say no team has ever done something, there's kind of a statistical reason for that. But yeah, I mean, Brady, I mean, I hated Brady for a long time because of the tuck rule when he took the Super Bowl away from the Raiders, because I'm a Raiders fan.
Yeah.
And so I've always kind of shit on him. I mean, he's great. I mean, let's just give it to that. He's the anomaly. But when I saw that game, I finally put down beating him up and went, okay, this guy is the GOAT. That's just it. He's the GOAT. So give us a tease out of some of the tips or advice that you give in the book on how can we light this spark as leaders underneath our teams?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we found in talking to leaders was they were intent on being intentional. They didn't hope to counter momentum. They sought to generate it. So they recognized that momentum was something that could be influenced and extended through intentionality. And so when you take a look at the things that allow that to transpire, it always starts with leadership. So you have to have effective leadership. Then leaders have to recruit the right people, generate the right culture, and then engage in preparation so that they're generating outcomes that when a moment occurs, they're able to take advantage of it. We call that the spark. From there, you have to amplify the spark through effective communications, ensuring that you've got a climate where people are feeling engaged, and then fostering belief and mindset, this understanding that we can do this. If we go back to that Super Bowl, for example, it was a linebacker who was actually said, we are about to create the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL.
Oh, really? Wow.
It wasn't Brady. It was a linebacker on the team. This is third quarter. It said, we are going to pull off the greatest comeback in the history of the sport. And then Brady was going up and down the sidelines, after every series, after every play, say, hey, great job. Keep it up. We've been here before. We know how to do this. We're built to do this. We've prepared for this. And so it wasn't going to be a function of luck that they were going to bring about an outcome. It was going to be a function of preparation and understanding we were built for this moment. And here's what it'll take for us to execute at our best.
Yeah.
And so when we go back through the book, we have tons of stories from leaders across all four of those verticals talking about times that they've been challenged to generate momentum, models that they've created to help them think systemically about what it takes to generate momentum. And then also, what does it take to reverse when momentum's against you? So when things aren't going your way, how do you change the day?
And sometimes that moment is like the hardest, like the one you're talking about with the Super Bowl. But, when the momentum seems to be against you and you can't find your footing, you saw that in a lot of Super Bowls. I think you saw that recently with, didn't we see that recently with Kansas City and was it the Eagles?
Eagles, yes.
Yeah. And they came in thinking they had this, we're going to three-peat, and not a lot of people ever three-peat, win consistently, 3 wins in the Super Bowl. And they're like, no, we have the momentum. We're going to do it. And they just went up and hit the Eagles wall because
the Eagles were prepared. Eagles were prepared, right? They had gone out and gotten Saquon Barkley. So they saw, hey, here's some gaps in our preparation that could be addressed through recruiting the right players and then integrating them into a culture that celebrates accountability. And so all of those things allowed the Eagles to perform well when presented the opportunity to be on the biggest stage once again. And we see that time and time again. I think about times during my military career where we engaged in pitch fights against dogged adversaries and things weren't looking good.
Yeah.
But yet you had to have this belief and mindset like we will prevail. We have a thing in the military where we say the battle is never lost until the commander says so.
Really?
No matter how dire the circumstances.
Wow.
The fight is never lost until the commander says so. If you ever saw the movie where Marcus Luttrell, the Navy SEAL, is in Afghanistan, his whole team has been compromised. and he's trying to find a way to survive. And there's a scene where the team commander is going to go make a phone call to let them know the team's in serious trouble. And one of the last things he says to Marcus is, "You're never out of the fight. You're never out of the fight," even though they were facing overwhelming odds. And he was never out of the fight because he never allowed himself to be out of the fight. And we see that for the best leaders. They're optimistic and realistic, but they prepare for those moments and they bring others along for the ride. And they're very intentional about the actions they take in service of generating that momentum that can lead to extraordinary outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a difference that can make. I like how the linebacker established the vision first and says, we're going to have the greatest comeback. And, you know, to me, I would think that would affect momentum, because you're putting up a boundary or a block, and you're going, we're not going to live in this momentum against us sort of mindset anymore. We are going to find the way out. I remember when Steve Jobs, you know, one of my friends was on the team that built the iPhone. You know, I mean, what he was asking them to do was beyond extraordinary, unprecedented, and a vision unlike, you know, I mean, they were cramming everything into an iPhone, a fax machine, a mail machine, a phone machine, a text message typing machine, you know, a keyboard. I mean, they were doing all this stuff that they were putting into that phone, and it was the daunting task to do. And their web browser, you know, all the stuff that went into iPhone. But he had this vision, and he set that goal. And you know, I've equated that a lot with visionaries and leaders. You know, that they, you know, you can't see the shore that you're heading to, and they have this instinct that goes, we are going to find land, and we're going that way, and I know that's where it's at. And you just have to trust their leadership. And sometimes, you know, that bigger than life goal is what can really moves people sometimes, and inspires them and brings out the best in us, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we think about inspiration and where it comes from. Well, the ancients, they said inspiration was derived from this word inspire, which means to breathe life into. How do you create the wherewithal for people to take that next breath, even when they seemingly feel as if they're being choked out, so to speak, by, you know, extraordinary demands that are being placed on name your thing? You know, as you go back to Jobs, this notion of we're going to make a dent in the universe.
Yeah.
We're going to do things that others believe are impossible. And we're going to do it because we've got talented people. We've got the right set of norms, values, beliefs, process. Yes, we will hold one another to account, but we are going to do this through preparation, not through simply hoping that we stumble onto an outcome. And you know, that preparation piece, we found it time and time again. The people who were the best at seizing momentum were the ones who were intent on generating momentum, not just hoping they would stumble onto something that would create some momentum for them. You know, the preparation piece is so essential. And Jobs was known as a taskmaster. It was hard to work for him, but people were willing to do it because they saw, hey, this person was a visionary. It was a true 1%er, probably a 0.01 of 1%er.
Yeah.
And so in the book, we provide people a concrete understanding of, here are ways in which you can go about doing this more effectively. At the end of every chapter, which each chapter is named after a component of the model, we provide a set of leader actions. The book is designed to be very practical in its orientation. It's not like a theoretical thing where we're just talking conceptually about the topic. We're talking about it in very practical terms, giving people access to stories that allow them to relate to how others have sought to do this. And then they can see how they might do it in their own context.
Yeah. You mentioned self-accountability a couple of times. How important is self-accountability, this process? Because we kind of live in this world where people, you know, victimhood competition world, where people are trying to one-up each other as who can play the biggest victim and get the most attention and validation from it.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Chris. One of my favorite quotes was by a gentleman named Will Durant. For years, this quote was misattributed to Aristotle. But actually, Will Durant had penned the quote when talking about the great philosophers. And he said, excellence is not an act, but a habit. Therefore, we are what we repeatedly do. True excellence is rooted in accountability. And in many organizations, accountability is a bad word. In the best organizations, accountability is the word.
Mm-hmm.
Excellence cannot be achieved through a lack of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And to be held to account is actually a way in which you demonstrate love for the other party. You
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate respect for them. And so I always like to say, you can keep it tight while keeping it light. You don't have to be a jerk when holding someone accountable, but you do have to be resolute. And if you're not willing to hold someone to account, starting with self, then you're saying, I really don't care about what it is I'm doing. And so for all those who like want to say the dog ate my homework, whatever, I'm like, then it really isn't that important to you. Plain and simple.
Yeah. There you go. All my ex-boyfriends were narcissists. Yeah, I've heard it all. And it's really weird when you really watch what's going on in this world. It has become a very emotionalism world that hates patriarchy, that hates meritocracy, and wants to just be the biggest victims they possibly can. And it's weaponized too. It's I'm a thing, and I have to destroy everybody else who victimized me because I didn't have any agency. And you're like, no, yeah, I think you did actually. But you see it. I remember one time I was watching The View, and I think I saw it because it went viral. But Whoopi Goldberg, there was someone who was on talking about the Holocaust and the horrors that the Jews endured in the Holocaust, and she started piping up that African American people had it far worse in slavery, et cetera, and it was just this moment where she seemed to be minimalizing the horrors of what Jewish people went through in the war, and then comparatively trying to one up it. And well, there's no discounting that both had horrible outcomes and horrible circumstances. It was so glaring to see, number one, trying to dismiss someone else's horror, and then trying to claim that your horror is bigger than their horror. And you're just like, God damn, is this where we're at? We're at this competition level where you get points for trying to be the biggest victim. And it's really struck me, and you see that a lot in our culture if you really understand it nowadays. You really look at like social media, what people are posting and stuff. And so it's interesting to me that you say, you really can't achieve things without that level of self-accountability, because it's true. And until you take self-accountability and self-actualization for yourself, you're never really achieve anything. But then that's kind of the point, I guess, for some of these people, right?
Well, I believe there are many who engage in relativism as the basis for all things in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And while that makes people feel better about certain things, because they're addressing what we know in psychology called cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So I'm experiencing something, it's causing anxiety. I look for a way in which I can reduce the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
All that being said, it doesn't actually address the core issue, which are, how am I seeking to make a difference given what I am encountering?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we go back to this notion of, in an organization, if in fact things aren't going my way, mm-hmm. am I simply going to engage in relativism and say, well, it's not going well for anybody? Or am I going to look and say, what actions can I take
mm-hmm.
to improve my situation, not simply to lament my situation? And in the book, we provide tangible tools to help people address their situation, to create better outcomes, that without taking those actions, what's shown us is that you're lowering the probability of success.
Definitely. I mean, you have to be accountable. I mean, that's part of a meritocracy in being successful in life. I mean, you can sit in I kind of equate it when I see people always playing the victim. I always kind of equate it to pigs sitting in the mud. And, they're sitting there bitching about, I'm in the mud. Oh, this is awful. I'm in the mud. And you're like, you can crawl out of the mud. No, I'm stuck here. It's, and you're like, no, come on. you can come out of the mud, and they're like, no, because I can't get attention. It's like an attention validation sort of experience people are trying to do. When really, if you just be self-accountable and self-actualize, you're going to get attention and validation when you're successful. So there you go.
Well, it's interesting, Chris, this notion of accountability. What I always tell folks, I don't need you to go above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to go above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
What I need to do, what I ask you to do, is that we go where we're supposed to, when we're supposed to, do what we're supposed to when we're there, and have the conviction to do that repeatedly. And if we simply do that, we will outcompete countless others who have the exact same opportunity, but elect not to do those things routinely.
Mm-hmm.
If the only thing that's valued in your organization is above and beyond, you've got the wrong standards. If the only ideas that are valued in your organization are outside the box, you've got the wrong box.
Yeah.
If people simply do that which is required, and they do that regularly, amazing things will transpire. But the reality is, for countless individuals in leadership roles and thinking about organizational activities, is that if 10 things are asked of them, they'll do 6 or 7. And if you see someone that does the 10 routinely, you don't view them as ordinary, you view them as extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
But in the best organizations, standard is established, standard is met. Standard is established, standard is met. Because there is a culture of accountability. There's a culture of accountability. And when it comes back to this topic of momentum, you prepare for certain things by saying, here are the standards we're going to have to meet. Let's ensure that we can meet them. If we meet those standards routinely, good things are going to happen. When that moment occurs, that spark happens, now we are prepared to seize on it. In the military, we always talk about wanting to be on the offense as opposed to the defense.
Yeah.
Battles are won on the offense. And so even when we're on the defense, we're defending the entire time with the intent to get back on the offense, to seize the initiative. And so we prepare for that. When the enemy has a slowdown or we've denied them the ability to do something, and now we can come off of defense and move on to offense. Now we dictate the conditions. That's when we have seized the momentum back. And so you see the same thing happen in industry as well. You see it happen in sports. You see it happen in politics. But it all starts with this notion of being accountable, having great leadership that holds people to account for behaving in a certain way, preparing in a certain way, communicating in a certain way, fostering a mindset that reinforces the importance of all those things, and then maintaining this positive attitude all along.
Yeah, definitely. Positive attitude. I mean, you get what you focus on, the vision of what you want to achieve. Like you said, you can win, you can lose some battles, but the key is to stick in and win the war. I've been beaten down in my life. I've sometimes I feel like I've just been beaten down to the mat in a boxing match, and I've always taken the attitude that as long as I can move a finger, as long as I can get back up, as long as I can put up a fight in some way, I can come back. And I've done that throughout my life. Sometimes I've gone through some really cathartic moments, and I think most of us do. I think we all kind of experience things that are, I don't know, that are designed to help us grow, but they definitely, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It is impossible to be a successful entrepreneur without developing that resilience and without learning those lessons from the experiences you're acquiring.
Yeah, it's very true. And what's funny is when things happen, I experienced the loss of everything in 2008 with the mortgage crisis, and had to rebuild. And during COVID, I experienced another huge financial losses for the models of business that we built, and had to re-engineer. Recently, with some of the things going on with the export and import and these tariffs and things, I'm like, great, it's 2008 all over again. The economy may come to a standstill, et cetera, et cetera. And in both cases, because I survived in 2008, the worst of the worst sort of, it would have been a depression if we hadn't bought our way out of it with the Fed. And even then it was a 10-year recovery, but, having that toolbox in my head to where, like, okay, I know what to do this time when things crash. I know what to do. I've survived before. I can survive again. I have the tools now, and I have the knowledge that I can survive. And so you're right. Sometimes having that toolbox where, you have that muscle that you've gained from failure makes you win. I created a lot of little companies, and they were kind of successful, kind of failures, and then finally, after a few of them, I finally hit it big. I needed those failures and practices to learn.
Yeah, it's getting reps, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get the reps in.
Get the reps in, build that muscle.
That absolutely. To grow a muscle, you have to tear it. Tear it too little, doesn't get any stronger. Tear it too much, irreparable harm. You tear it the right way, and the fibers go back stronger. When you're an organizational leader, getting those reps in routinely is important. Sometimes you are going to tear it too much, and then you're going to have to recover from that. You're going to have to figure out, okay, now how do I avoid doing that the next time? But instead of lamenting the fact that you have to get those reps in, you have to embrace the reality of needing to get those reps in and valuing those reps and seeking to learn from those reps.
Yeah.
It's honor the process. Honor the process.
Honor the process. I like that. I think maybe that's what I've learned to do is honor the process, where I go, okay. I remember during COVID, I was starting to get depressed, and I was just watching hundreds of thousands of dollars just burn. We were doing events and interviewing CEOs and people at events all the time, and traveling, all the time, and just watching these events shut down it was just watching money burn. And so I remember seeing a post, and one of my friends said, "Here's what you do right now. You do one of two things. You either be a lifter, or you find a lifter, and let them lift you." And I was just like, okay, what are we going to do? And in that moment, I'm not a good follower. I'm not a good find a lifter sort of person. I'm more of a lifter myself. I sat down with my assets and said, well, what do I have? And usually in those cathartic moments, I look for gratitude. So it's like, okay, let's not cry about what we lost, because we probably didn't own it anyway, according to maybe Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. Memento mori, we don't own this; it passes through our life. And so so I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do? Well, I'm going to become a leader through this, and I'm going to lead people. And so I did, and that gave me the momentum I needed to get out of my depression and my victimhood mindset, where I'm like, the whole world's melting around me, Poe is me, yada yada yada, why me again, yada yada yada. And instead, it got me focusing on that comeback, and like, how can we come back? And we came back stronger and more powerful, and actually making a better difference in the world with what we do. And you just have to find that footing, put one step in front of the other, eat the elephant one bite at a time. I always like to equate it, like you say, trust the process, as it were.
Yeah. So if you go back to that moment where things aren't looking positive, but there's this little voice inside you that says, I must fight. I will persist. What we find the most effective leaders, they all have that. Warren Bennis calls it hardiness. HARDINESS, hardiness. It's this resilience, this optimism that, yes, I can do this. They're optimistic and realistic, but they're incredibly dogged in their willingness to say, I will find a way. Now, hardiness can be developed over time through the accumulation of experience and learning from those experiences. But it also is amplified by having a clear purpose and understanding what's the difference you're intent on making in the world. You're going to put a lot more into something that you genuinely believe in the importance of than something you don't. And so also putting people in a position to win would say, hey, if this is something you care about, be a part of this team, because this is something this team is intent on making a difference as pertains to bringing about some outcome you desire. And obviously, when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to be pursuing something that you care very deeply about. And I think one of the most important things a leader has to do is put people in a position to win. But it's also finding the right people to be part of your team. Not everybody is the right fit for your team, because while they might have the capabilities to do what you're asking them to do, they might not have a passion for doing what you're intent on pursuing. And so finding the right people, putting the right puzzle together, honoring that process, but constantly coming back to, here's the difference we're going to make. Here's the difference we're going to make, and here's why it's going to matter to each and every one of us, is so important in helping people to get through the dark times.
Oh, yeah. And that passion is everything, because, like you title your book, to get that spark, hope and passion in the human element is so huge. I mean, things can be the worst in this world. I mean, bubonic plagues and, you name it, trials and tribulations, major earthquakes, tornadoes and stuff. Hope is the one thing that seems to endure, and seems to be the one thing that persists as species, is finding hope. Let's hope AI picks up some of that and keeps us around once it becomes doesn't need us anymore. But as we go out, what's some advice you can give to somebody who feels stuck and unable to create a momentum?
One, start with a clear understanding of what is it we're really intent on doing. You'd be surprised how many people don't take a clear mission and say, okay, here's what we exist to do, and then translate that into SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bounded. So this notion of bite the elephant, right? Like, how do you break down a big objective into smaller ones? By creating those SMART goals and then coming up with tangible ways in which you can achieve those goals, you now start to create those small wins that are stackable, that create the momentum. But it starts with, take something big, break it down into something smaller, but very tangible, and then doggedly pursue each one of those things. A lot of folks, they skip ahead to the end and they don't think about what has to happen along the way. You take a look at like Alabama football under Nick Saban, and he talked about, there were 5 things that they had to do really well, pride on the team, but it was around making sure that every rep for anything was done to standard. How do we do this single rep to standard? And if we do that, then how do we commit to doing the next rep to standard? Whatever the task was, whether it was schoolwork, whether it was footwork, whether it was nutrition, whether it was a rep inside the weight room. But it was the stacking all those actions up. Said, if we do that, we do it to the best of our ability, great things are going to happen. He never went into a season saying the intent is to win the national title. The intent was always, how can we as a collective operate to our very best relative to these high standards? And if we do that, given the assembled talent we have, odds are we're going to win championships. And so my thing to everybody is simply honor the process, be accountable.
Yeah, be accountable. Everybody, work on it.
Start with the end in mind.
Yeah,
start with the end in mind.
You can't fix your problems either unless you're accountable. That's the one thing. I see a lot of people not doing in today's world is they always want a victimhood, and by not taking self accountability, they never fix their problems. So they're always, in their mind, being victimized when they're really creating the scenarios for it and setups. And then as soon as anything happens that demands they're accountable or they need to be self-actualized, then they're like, oh, I'm a victim. No, we're just trying to make you accountable because, what's that old saying? I went to a Tori Amos concert once, and she said, I was at this point in my life where I was in this victimhood mindset. And she said, finally, one of my friends said to me, why don't you shut up and get off the cross? We need the wood. I thought that was such a powerful thing. It's like, hey, okay, well, we appreciate you doing the performative victimhood thing of nailing yourself to your own cross up there. But, we got things we need to do. And that's really cute what you're up to. But come on down. We need the wood. Let's get this over with. Round this up. And she realized that she'd been living this victimhood mentality for all these years. And, she reached that point of clarity. So there you go. Bernie, give us your final thoughts as we go out. Tell people how they can order the book, et cetera, and learn more about you.
Yeah. So the book can be ordered on Amazon. It is easy to find. With respect to why they should order the book, if they're intent on creating great things in their lives, this book is a way in which they can increase the likelihood of getting there. Plain and simple. It's a leader's guide. It's very practical in its orientation. And all of us need to generate positive momentum in our lives, whether it's our personal lives, whether it's our work lives, whether it's our spiritual lives, name your thing. Generating positive momentum matters. And so this book can be applied to any context. It can be applied to any field of endeavor. It is easy to read. It is enjoyable to read. I think people will like the stories and people will like the model, because the model is something that all of them can say, hey, I see how I can go enact this in my life. And so last thing I'd say is it's been an honor to be on your show, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on. And I look forward to continuing to follow you going forward. And I wish you all the best, and I wish all the best to all the listeners.
Thank you, and it's an honor to have you on the show, sir. And thank you for your service to our country. It's interesting. Our military in the leadership that it teaches, and how it operates. Where you can decapitate one part of leadership, and teams can still do what they need to do. It really became apparent when I looked at how the Ukraine war was being fought by the Russians, and what we used to think was, I guess, the second. How did the State Department put it? They said the perceived second greatest military in the world, the Russians, have now been shown to be the second greatest military in Ukraine. I stole that from the State Department. But what a great fucking line. But you saw that, where their leadership structure and how they do leadership, and how we do it, makes us the greatest military in the world. I mean, that's just not hoopla that's out there. I mean, it makes a difference in everything. And probably one of the reasons we're a great country, or perceived to be a great country by people. It depends on the week, I suppose. But thank you very much, Bernie, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, General. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
You too. And thanks to your audience for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. The New Science of Momentum: How the Best Coaches and Leaders Build a Fire from a Single Spark. And I love how a lot of it revolves around self-accountability. We need to bring that back, boys. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.